the logistics first class. So I'd have to say that goes to the top of the class. Very impressive, very impressive. But I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I probably want to cover a few areas and try and carve out a little bit of time for some Q&A if you have, sir. I've only got one slight challenge, is that I need to be on a 19:15 train to Manchester because we've got a resilience on railway infrastructure conference tomorrow. So that's kind of my backstop. So I will try not to spend too much time padding out the conversation. If you've got some questions, please feel free, but I've got no problem if you want to follow up separately afterwards. I think to your comment around biographies or otherwise, one big driver for me about why am I doing this year is because I think the institution's doing some really good stuff. And it's about it, not anybody who's in a particular role. And I think there's some really interesting challenges and opportunities for us and for developing how we can influence the sort of railway engineering community going forward. So I think that's a really important thing to contribute to, and see if we can nudge some of that forward would be great, because probably we've all got a challenging demographic. We've seen an age profile that's increasing across a lot of the industry that we've all worked in to some degree for many years. And I think we need to try and be a bit more inclusive and rejuvenate and re-energize some of the contribution we can make. So I think there's some really good stuff coming forward from the institution, not without its challenges, but I think it's something that we definitely should work. So probably want to have a quick whistle tour through maybe half a dozen areas this afternoon or this evening. The general kind of industry and economic outlook that we're facing in the next control period, how the PWI is fitting into the railway engineering community, how was last year for us as an institution, which is actually very, very, very positive. Areas of emphasis that we've got going forward, perhaps how you and other colleagues and members can help and contribute to that. One of the things I'm always very interested in is how people make choices as engineers or as railway practitioners. That's one of the areas I'm testing a little bit this year with a lot of the teams. And really, if there are any other questions you've got in the context of that, we're going through quite a strategic shift in opportunity. We've made some proposals around renaming the institution, which might be a big positive for some people. It might be quite controversial for others. So happy to pick up any questions on that as well as we go through. So without further ado, first one I said I was going to talk about there was sort of economic outlook and industry context. Control period 7 in Network Rail world, pretty challenging settlement. Inflation's diluted a lot of the contribution there. We've heard of the curtailment of HS2, the northern legs, etc. Great British Railways seems to be taking a long time to come into fruition. In TfL, they've had a really challenging period post-pandemic around getting their kind of funding arrangements in place. And where I, in my day job, do quite a lot of work in Northern Ireland, the Stormont Assembly's only just got back on the pitch, and that's caused a real difficulty in funding and arrangements and choices for investment. And the fact that as a nation we've chosen to exit the European Union, that's also changed relationships. It's changed some of the dynamics, and it's changed some of the funding streams that might have been available in the past. So I don't think there's a situation where everything's awash with funding. That might have been the case 1 or 2 control periods ago. There was lots of investment and enhancement opportunities. It's really quite tight, and the sort of country credit card is pretty maxed out with post-pandemic wars and other things. So not easy. We've got to use the funding that we can access well on the back of that. So what does that mean from our perspective in the railway engineering community? I think whether your focus is in design, whether it's in installation, life extension, maintenance, etc., there's a big focus on what's the minimum cost-effective answers we can come up with. How can we show that value for money? And how does that play to the overall whole life cost of anything that we're doing? That could or should have been a core thing of what we might do as engineers anyway. But I think it's even more in sharp focus given that funding backdrop. So how would we think about that community and the way the PWI can help and contribute to some of that? I think we need to be a bit holistic. We need to think about things as systems and not end up in individual silos. I think there's a lot more connectivity in everything that we do. We've seen it today in the fact that we've got an agile arrangement with a meeting in person, but also some colleagues who are able to join us online. A lot of our working is using newer technology, and that makes things a lot more accessible. But it also opens up some different challenges. This whole Internet of Things and different securities, risk, control and concern around that makes it not straightforward. You're thinking about things you perhaps didn't have to 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. When we think about some of those building blocks, we've got people that are very strong subject matter experts in some fields, and we were talking about it while we're having a sandwich actually. You know, you've got real expertise maybe in earthworks or structures or in track systems. Maybe there's people that are really focused on wheel-rail interface. We're doing a lot more in terms of electrification and power supplies, and there's been some tremendous work over the last 3 or 4 years, particularly led by my predecessor, President Peter Dearman, who's done an awful lot of work in pushing a broadening of the interest and engagement, a range of railway engineers, not just traditional track or structures or geotechnical backgrounds. So I think we're trying to be much more inclusive and diverse. We certainly want to try and test some of those things and understand their own boundaries and interfaces and think a bit holistically. And we're doing that against a backdrop of different climate change challenges. That's something that I didn't think much of about at the start of my career. Perhaps many of you didn't either. It's a different dynamic and a test for the whole of society, but certainly for us as infrastructure professionals as well. That said, we're trying to frame that and address that in the type of expertise and knowledge that we bring forward as an institution. One of the big drivers for thinking about us as an institution that's open and for railway engineering is about that inclusivity and trying to understand how do we attract different, varied and able individuals from a lot of different backgrounds, not just the traditional areas that we have recruited from or developed people in. We know we've got a demographic challenge. We know that people have choices about what they want to do in the future, and if we are to be a lively, constructive and productive contribution to the economy and to technical solutions and knowledge, we need to attract some of that talent, and it can't just come from traditional spaces. So I'm really keen to think about how we could use accessing different skills and capabilities, and that's one of the reasons why the board as a whole and the institution is thinking about how do we attract different people, different perspectives. Doesn't mean you close off traditional routes, but you also open things up and try and be a bit more inclusive in some of these areas. That was a big driver towards the rebranding, but also towards trying to find people right routes to professional qualifications, to broadening the skill set so it is perhaps added to the complete infrastructure and railway system solutions as well. So a pretty important driver for us. Last year was a good year for the PWI. It's grown in terms of membership to over nearly 3,900. 310 of those are professionally registered through the PWI, whether that's EngTech, incorporated engineers, or chartered engineers. That's something that since 2019, where we gained the ability to do that, has been a massive driver for development, I think, of some of our people, and probably an attraction for people working with the institution as well and joining. There's been a strong growth in corporate membership. We've got nearly 60, and also some heritage members as well. So it's attracting more than just traditional businesses and players on the back of that. And we've probably done £1.3 million worth of work and turnover as an institution, mainly through training, but also through corporate membership and individual membership as well. Technical education's been really strong. That's a kind of half of that. And there's been a tremendous piece of work from Brian Counter and the technical team in developing new education routes and courses, things like the earthworks and drainage courses, advanced track technicians, to try and embed some of that skill set at ground level, and also with a good signpost towards power and electrification, bringing in third and fourth year rail courses as well, which has been very well received. So that's part of the broadening of what we're trying to encourage and develop. At the same time, it was an opportunity for us to reset our next 5 years in strategy and plan. So some of the things that we said that we were going to focus on, there are kind of 7 goals. These were all set out by Stephen Barber in the institution's journal back in January. But just to kind of reinforce a few of those key points, goal 1, try and make sure our vision, purpose and image and branding is consistent. And that's part of the name change. We want to try and be more inclusive and focus on that railway engineering. And for railway engineering, not just engineers. So there might be people that are involved in our industry and our sector that can also contribute and make a difference. So we want to open up that chance to help them be part of that rich conversation as well. We want to try and have a resilient organisation in business and income stream. So the training strands that we talked about earlier, that technical training as well as the corporate and individual membership, are really important. They grew very rapidly through the pandemic. We want to sustain that and find the right solutions for organisations that want to tap into our learning and knowledge and know-how. And there's been some really strong work done with regard to that for sure. We want to try and make sure we're a little bit more resilient and we're not just relying on people. So some of the investment in business systems and customer relationship management make it easier for you to assess how you might use the institution to tap into knowledge hubs and look at know-how that's available, might be shared from yourselves, or it might be you accessing other people's expertise. I think that's really, really important. We want to try and retain members. We've always got a natural, and you heard the sad news of some people that have passed away that you announced at the start. There's always going to be a natural thing that comes to us all eventually. But we also look at people because they decide they don't want to remain part of the institution, but they're still active practitioners. We want to try and make sure they're really keen to continue to learn, develop, and feel that they're benefiting from what we do. And that's where some of that professional engineering institution know-how, the ability to provide them with a route to move towards incorporated or chartered engineer status is one of the strands that we might take forward with regards to that. I think that's an area that's stepped forward greatly in the last 5 years. And I think the way I've seen the professional development team be superb in helping people find a route to the qualifications that might not get that through other engineering institutions. It doesn't mean the standard drops. It means that they work with the individual to make sure they can demonstrate they reach that standard. And I think that's a brilliant ethos. It's definitely made a massive difference with regard to each of the items that are there. So I think that's a very important part of that. As an institution, Stephen Barber would tell you that we've had more impact and influence amongst other professional engineering institutions since we've become a recognised awarding body. So that whole professionalism and that drive to acknowledge that has been a really positive thing. People that used to look down on the PWI as an institution or an organisation are acknowledging some of the great work that it's doing in knowledge retention and professional development. So I think that's been very, very powerful. We want to try and build on that, and there might be some collaborative work we do with other institutions. I talked earlier about this idea of being inclusive. There'll be times that people want to come and perhaps join us, and we're able to say, do you know what, if those are your interests, maybe a different institution can work even better for you. We need to be bold enough that says sometimes we're brilliant for people, and sometimes other institutions can support differently or better. So this isn't a people grab or a land grab with regards to just trying to gather new members. It's about where can we make a real difference for the industry and the sector that we're working in. And I think in addition to that, one of the sort of key points I would draw out of the last goal we've got is how do we help capture the knowledge and custodianship that we've got in the organisational memory and individual memory, that capability in this room alone would have tremendous know-how and learning from positive things, but also disasters and things that have gone wrong, because we've all suffered through those things. Unfortunately, businesses and industries have that, or almost that organisational amnesia sometimes. And one of the things I think the PWI, and as we move forward becoming the institution for railway engineering, can do is be a bit of a knowledge and know-how hub that can help remind people of that learning, why we do things, and have a good accessible place to draw some of that in. So I think that makes a big, big difference. I've talked a lot as we go through some of that around the emphasis on professional qualifications and being able to acknowledge that there's lots of practical routes that have come into play over the last 4 or 5 years, and we're always trying to find a route that will help people be properly recognised as best they can. I think, and as we celebrate our 140th anniversary, one thing that we're trying to do is push the number of professionally qualified engineers across our organisation. We could probably, between the various corporate members and individual constituents, it only takes 1 or 2 individuals to move forward and to achieve that recognition from each organisation, and we'll easily meet and beat that 140 target. That will be a massive step forward for us. And we're one of the few institutions that's actually growing compared to some of the others. So I think it's a very healthy position for us going forward. I've talked about that inclusion and that desire to attract people that perhaps don't feel wanted or looked after by other potential institutions or areas in our sector. I think one of the opportunities we've also got is to start to develop a little bit of what I might describe as thought leadership. What are we trying to do to represent our members and make the right influence and choices across the sector and industry that we work in? I don't like the siloed position that many organisations seem to be taking, and they're becoming very specialist. They don't think about the connectivity or the systems and subsystem approach. Why are we here? Is it around safe and effective infrastructure solutions? Do we know what we do and how that impacts on other specialisms? So we might be expert in the hard infrastructure, the design or the delivery of that, but we need to understand how that impacts on rolling stock, how it impacts on passenger flows in stations, how we deal with the elements that touch what we do. And I think there's been quite a narrow view on that in the past. And I think it's really important to try and broaden that engagement and interest, and try and make sure that we can include that. So those are areas as a thrust we want to try and be more inclusive, whichever specialism you happen to come from. And I think then all sections, all potential members, the communities that we work with, we're really keen to try and get a practical contribution. How would you constructively engage? You might agree or disagree with some of the proposals that we're talking about to try and build or shape the institution. But please engage, please have that conversation. It was interesting back in January when asked the kind of question around what do people think about reframing the name of the institution, and should we do that? And I asked people to comment on that in the journal. There was, I think I would say there was a unanimous constructive response. It might have disagreed with some of the points, because we had some people that said we don't think this is the right thing to do, but it was put forward in a constructive manner, and I think that was really refreshing. So I think if people have views either in support or challenging some of the things that we're aiming to do, it's really important to try and make sure we have that practical communication. And I would ask you to think about it, if that's something that you feel passionate about, or the way we do things are not helpful to your interests, then please raise them. Please flag it up and lift the phone, drop us an email, think about ways that you would want to put on the table. Actually, we think this should be different, or would be better if. It's really pleasing to have a robust conversation on these points. It might be quite hard sometimes, but it's really important that we have that conversation and that debate, and try and take people forward with what we're trying to do and trying to achieve. So I would encourage you both in terms of reflecting on what you think works well, but also areas you've got genuine concerns about, and test us. Come to us and say, we don't think you're supporting what we want to do or what our colleagues want to do in the right way, because we will be responsive. We might agree or disagree, but we will be responsive around that, and try and find the right answers going forward. I think one sort of final topic area that we're actually touching on before we came into the main meeting, but it's something I'm quite interested in for this year, and the way in which we're trying to move the institution forward, is how we touch on making choices. This is a little bit of a practical theme that I've been working on and thinking with the relevant teams. We work in sectors. Doesn't matter whether you work with organisations and infrastructure managers such as Network Rail or TransLink in Northern Ireland, or TfL, contractors or consultants, and I've probably worked in for or in all of those spaces. I think we've moved away from an individual competence-based and centric approach, where we've relied on competent people in particular roles, and moved to a much more by rote, process-driven, trying to be consistent. Here are the rules, and we tick the boxes in an approach. That has driven some degree of consistency, but I think as an industry we've suffered, because I don't think we've got the people developing and as thoughtful and challenging as they might be as a consequence. So one of the areas I'm kind of asking people to think about a little bit is how they make choices or decisions. And some of the things that I'm keen to pick off as part of that is really, do you work on data? Do you get bombarded by practical information? Do you prefer to operate on instinct? Is it your gut that tells you what the right answer is? Do you base it on knowledge or experience? What criteria do you use? How systematic are you around thinking of those things? We'll all have seen people that are right across these spectrums, but if you're aware of your own preferences and what what a strong approach might be, I think it's really important to draw that in. The one thing I would say that's been constructive over the last 10 to 15 years is a degree of increase in collaborative working across people and organisations. So I think that helps some of the diverse inputs and the information you might use to make your decisions. But I'm not sure that people think quite hard critically about what information they're sifting, whether they're problem solving, what their rationale and reasoning is around the choices that they make, or whether they're performing by rote in line with standards. There's probably not as much analysis or evaluation as there could be in some of these key choices. And as a result, I think we end up going back to the very start of this conversation. We end up spending resources and money and time and effort on things that are perhaps not best value for money or not giving the best outcome that people are looking for. And we're certainly maybe not communicating as well as we might about why we make some of these choices or decisions. So I think some of that rationale and self-awareness about why you make some of those choices is really important, and thinking about how you're testing and seeking that evidence. If I draw it into that engineering, technical, standards-based approach, I see maybe examples where we don't properly test some of the standards that are laid down and people don't understand the drivers behind why the words were written. And as a consequence, they're missing opportunities to make legitimate alternative propositions and not waste money or unnecessarily achieve something that ends up with a golden handle rather than that straightforward steel one. Part of that is going to be knowing the boundaries of your own competence and knowing when you need to tap into some help and advice and expertise. But it's also around when the systems work together and the subsystems and thinking about that holistically rather than just functional silo expertise and being very, very good in one area only. So I think we need to push our people to join the dots a little bit. Whatever you do decide to do, I think we need to own your own choices and be confident around that. I'm not sure that's always what I see. And I think people sometimes feel uncomfortable about that. So one of the things in terms of the professional engineering ethos and the drive behind the institution is help people have the confidence and capability to take that forward and to challenge things if they believe they've got a strong case. Kind of be courageous and brave around it. Sometimes you need to go back to things 3, 4 or 5 times to get to to wear people down with the right answer on some of these things. If I think about work I did on TransPennine as a program maybe 5 or 6 years ago, there was an awful lot of what I would call box ticking necessary work to say, yeah, I've evaluated option 14, 15 and 16. We were never going to do 14, 15 or 16. It was a complete waste of time and money to even think about them. And people just needed more confidence to say they're parked. It's actually option 2A or 2B that are the best scenarios in this circumstance. So I think we need our engineers and our leaders to be a lot more confident in those particular areas. Think about outcomes on that one. Some of those major infrastructure projects, you'll have seen a lot of those in this part of the world when you look at Great Western electrification, and that had a whole range of challenges around it. You might take the view that certain bits were slightly over-engineered. I would take that view, and that was wearing my electrification hat on. But I think in those kind of things, we didn't serve the industry well as engineers because we didn't challenge and sort those things out early enough. There was lots of other reasons as to why things went awry, but we need to be brave and bold enough to challenge some of those things. And part of what the institution needs to do is try and find a supportive framework to help people set out the rationale and make their case well, rationally based on sound principles, but being courageous enough and being persistent enough to make that argument. Some people might not want to do that, and that's fair. But I think we need a core of individuals that are prepared to advocate for what they believe is the right thing and back that up appropriately with the right rationale, with the right supporting information. But as I say, however you come to your conclusion, whether that's through your critical thinking or on a very data-driven or analysis-based thing, let's own those choices and take it forward constructively. I think in those areas, there are interesting topics and points for debate as we try and make our institution more inclusive. I think we need to try and tap into different perspectives and different thinking. I'm conscious that I'm probably a youngster, relatively speaking, in experience in this amongst some people. There's been quite a few flying hours in the room, I think. But it would be fair to say that in the 37 years-ish, I've seen quite a lot of different perspectives. And I'm only the junior here from that point of view. I think there's different know-how, but we need to also bring in completely different perspectives as well and think about how we welcome that in, we challenge it and we test it, and see how we can meld those things well going forward. I think it's a time of opportunity for the institution for railway engineering. If we can make that work for everybody, that doesn't lose the brilliant history and legacy of the permanent way institution, but takes it forward into a new energized level and is able to draw some of those things in. So those were some of the points I wanted to touch on. I think it's a exciting opportunity for the PWI just now. I think Institution for Railway Engineering is a good direction of travel. I think that's only one of many strands that we want to take forward. And I think we want to be seen as a space where people can develop and grow and access expert knowledge, but we think about it a little bit holistically. And lots of good work being done on it, but we'll probably still be getting things wrong. So back to that, we're happy to listen and take that feedback. Then I would echo that point. And I would ask if people do have any questions, challenges, or stuff that they would just want to raise generally, then please ask. And then go for the floor's yours, folks.
Yeah, he's looked at me too. He's done really good. I've actually got my background is not railway engineering, although I always like trains, but it's more of a policy background really. So what you've been talking about, so I've written so many notes, whereas after it's about some fixings for switch and crossing, I don't write many notes. Well, I do write a few. I can understand, and picking up from the meetings of the joint secretary, well, the secretaries, I mean, our biannual meetings.
Yes.
We picked up what's going on at the institution in the central and particularly Brian Counter's thrust on training. And I can understand how one needs to keep persuading more and more people in the industry that they ought to learn more about other aspects of the industry. We've had a few talks here that have done that too, and very successfully. We have an annual joint meeting with the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, and we also, before COVID, started to set up a joint meeting with the Institution of Railway Signal Engineers. So there's that sort of thing going on. So I can understand how individuals can be persuaded, ought to be persuaded to learn more rather than just something very narrow. But I don't know enough about how railway projects are organised. But I can well imagine that unless you're an extremely senior and powerful personality, to actually influence how a major project is directed, what the routes it takes, must be pretty difficult. Almost as though one's battling with a system that just won't allow change. I suppose my thinking is that one goes back to maybe the days of the chief civil engineer, where there was one person, a controlling mind, who could say, right, we're not going to do this, we're going down this route, I want you to do this, that sort of thing.
Very direct.
Well, yes, but in a a constructive way, not dictatorial, I hope.
Behind dictatorship?
Well, I was trying to avoid that, but you've got to be firm enough to get some progress. But it just seems to me that one's got railway standards, one's got an awful lot of people who will be more concerned about doing something to budget rather than addressing new social and environmental issues that are coming forward. And I was just sort of, I haven't got an answer, but I'm just thinking the issue of how does the institution influence the more senior, influential project managers and directors to want what they're doing to be more, more explorative. I think it can be done through pumping stuff out through the journals, not just obviously the PWI journal, but the other the rest of the media, that's to do with the railway industry and events and so on. And I suppose talking, but that just seems to me a particularly difficult area to change the massive number of people in the industry who are all have all sorts of different pressures on them, and in the end are required to deliver within a fairly narrow brief. To get the whole culture to be one of looking to widen that brief. So, that's my sort of one reaction to the big issue of influence.
Can I make a couple of comments on that? I think you draw out a really important point about different channels to communicate on that. So I think your point around whether it's professional engineering institutions, whether it's policy bodies, whether it's other key stakeholders, there's lots of different communication channels there, and that makes it quite difficult for projects and project teams to assimilate them. So your guiding mind comment is fair. Usually there's lots of reflective hindsight engineering when major projects go wrong, and there's a big report or parliamentary report or public inquiry written about many of those things. And some of those points will be very valid learning. I think that probably goes to what elements of good practice might be in knowledge hubs, whether in our institution or any other source. We want to be trying to draw together examples of good practice. I think my observation, having worked on some very successful projects, but also some really, really challenging projects, which felt really difficult when you were in the midst of it. The individuals make a difference. So anybody in this room who was in those kind of roles could make a difference by what they are doing. They might not feel as if they are, but if they've got a holistic perspective, if they understand how they fit together with some of the other contributors in those projects, where they're trying to make that advocacy or the points for consideration, you won't always get landed, or choices might be made elsewhere that it goes down a different route or a different direction. But if you're a competent and capable and thoughtful and professional that is contributing in that way, you've given the project a better chance of making a better choice. And I think that's quite an important part of getting that right. And I think when you reflect on that as an individual, that's where you might ask your professional engineering institution or other sources, how can you help me broaden that knowledge, that know-how, what can I tap into, and see if I can particularly make a difference on these particular areas. I worked on a really difficult project on Edinburgh Trams in 2006 to 2011. I did more dispute resolution on that particular programme than I've ever done in the rest of my career in total. There were lots of reasons for that, and that doesn't mean that one side or the other was right or wrong, but when you go through processes like that, you learn an awful lot. You reflect quite a lot and think of what could I have tried differently to try and resolve that issue earlier, faster, with a different outcome. And I think you've got to be open to that self-reflection that says, nah, I didn't get that right. Or somebody else made a choice that made this worse rather than better on the back of this. So I think you've got to have that learning interest in how do I do it differently. on each of those things, and thinking about what is the outcome, what is the right outcome on any particular programme that somebody is looking for. Your point about budget, I don't think you can escape. You can't have something that is unaffordable, even if you've got a brilliant aspiration of this would be fantastic if this is the end result. If we don't have the money to pay for it, we've got to work in a sensible envelope. So I think that's always got to have a business part of what you think, as well as a technical part or a policy part of what you think.
Okay.
Can agree or disagree, I don't mind.
No, it's fine. Yeah, so,
Well, I'll fire something in.
Yeah, go on.
A lot of occasions I find on some of the projects, somebody will have a solution in their mind, and you have to actually engineer the product to suit their solution. They don't consider the options and what is going to be the best option, what is the most economical option. They get this figure in their mind, and you actually have to engineer it to meet the standard, rather than taking the standard, saying this is what we need. And that happens so often, and you waste so much time going backwards and forwards trying to make the product fit the solution that somebody's got in their mind.
Yes, that's a really interesting point, because but back to that kind of think outcomes piece, what sort of measure, what does the end game that you're trying to get, if you spend the effort in trying to get that properly defined, you get the best chance of not having to rework it 4, 5 or 6 times, but also, to your point, to try and get different ways of achieving that. There might be several ways of achieving that outcome, as long as everybody's focused on the outcome, not the one way in which they would prefer it to be got to. So I think that's a really important point, but that's also where I was coming from a little bit around this idea of being able to challenge or being brave enough to challenge the boundary of, well, this is how I would interpret the standard. Well, yes, but actually the principles underlying it are about this, and this is how we could get to what you want a different way, maybe faster, maybe more cost effectively, maybe without impacting stakeholder X or Y or Z as much. And that's why I think the understanding of those things is something that's really important, and being able to define and argue and advocate your case accordingly is really important. And sometimes maybe the person that's got that one thing in their mind might not be right.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm hoping that our institution will be able to influence some of the things that are happening at the moment, and get behind the reasons why they're happening. Going back to this working in silos.
Yes.
If you go back to the later BR days, when we were business led, no question about it, we certainly were. And at that time, we worked in disciplines, working silos. You could always walk into the next set of officers and talk to whoever it was that you wished to do so. And you all joined in with doing specific jobs. If it was a strategic crossing renewal or something like that, it was automatic that the other disciplines would know what you were going to be doing and would be discussing with you and would have money in their budget to support you.
Yeah.
That's how it worked. And it did work extremely well. Now, it's all killed by rail track. It certainly was. And that's one thing I would take a little bit of issue with your article in the journal, when you were talking about the accidents at that time in Hatfield, and particularly the ones at Bromley Bar, where you said it was perhaps not understood the mechanisms as to why it happened. It's very obvious why it happened. That rail track was the most of the problem to it, because of the way they ran the organisation, or said they were running the organisation, and the people supporting them or doing the actual work were not making the judgment, or weren't allowed to make the judgment. Anyway, that was, we were there then, that was the point. And there were pretty experienced ex-BR people were trying to say to Railtrack, this is going to happen unless you let us put our judgment into it. We say there's a speed restriction required, or that work needs doing, there'll be a problem.
Yeah.
But there was. Anyway, let me just go a little bit further, because
Yeah,
the
yeah.
bit that really matters is what we can do as an institution. When you look at things like, I ran the first 3 practical track working challenges.
Yes.
And it's very obvious that the people coming from the various, well, not just from Network Rail, but from people like your company.
Yeah.
And they're all very keen, but they do specific jobs. They're not rounded engineers, they do specific jobs. That's the silo mentality again. They got colleagues from the same company there, and they'd hardly met them before, and yet they were supposed to be doing the same, combining to do the same job. Brian Counter's people, with the people on their courses, I mean, Paul Levitt will say he's doing things like off-track stuff at the moment, drainage, earthworks, those sorts of things. And he tells them the practical solutions to various things. And he's saying to them, well, this is unique. You can't see this from train-borne equipment and so on. You have to go out and have a look at this. And they immediately gets the reaction, you're talking out your backside, mate, we can't go out on the track anymore. There's a problem with it. I hope that we can do something about that. And I just feel that we're getting to the stage where in a very short time, we're going to have a lot of people working in offices who are making decisions about what's going to be happening outside. They've never been out there to make any judgment on it whatsoever. And it's like, for me, I would call myself a permanent engineer, but then again, as far as permanent way is concerned, I was an S&C designer first and foremost, I suppose. But all we did, all the other stuff, plain line, earthworks, drainage, the whole thing, infrastructure, fence to fence. Who does that now?
And I think that's a really important point. That's part of what I'm trying to deal with, is sort of think about systems, or a series of subsystems working together. I've had the privilege of being able to work in electrification programs on permanent way maintenance engineer many years ago. That fence to fence perspective that you talked about, thinking about things as an infrastructure engineer and combining the different areas of expertise, be it track, signalling, power, operations, how you interface with actually running trains, because that's what our infrastructure is there to enable. So I think we need to try and give our future talented individuals the opportunity to work across some of these boundaries, and to not feel restricted to they have to stay in their particular area. Thinking about your point on, maybe I was clumsy in my example in Railtrack and Porter, but what I was trying to get over was that there were individuals in particular important roles that had the opportunity to intervene, perhaps didn't have the perspective that they might have had. There were also other individuals who might, if they had taken a different action or a different role, they could have put a speed restriction on. They might have been very unpopular, but they could have. Right? And if you went to other parts of the country, that might have happened. Right? So it wasn't one size fits all. It was part of a dysfunctional system. And I think, if I was talking earlier, one of the practical things that we would say would be the allocation of capability at the time of privatization was disproportionate. There was a number of organizations that tended to get slightly better talent, and other organizations that had perhaps more learning to do or more development to do. And I think the industry suffered as a result with that imbalance.
Yeah.
Not because people deliberately wanted issues or accidents to happen, but it was a consequence of some poor choices on the back of that. That's fair.
Yeah, thank you.
Do people have a view around the institution reframing this discussion around an institution for railway engineering, and that drive to be a little bit more inclusive? Do people feel that's good? Well, that's okay. It's a bad thing. What's people's perspective?
So for me, I'm a little hoarse, so sorry, but I joined the institution 2008, 2009. Definitely a track institution. Definitely felt like an outsider. Been here all of the time.
Yeah.
Always focused on drainage. Only really recently when we've had the drive for construction registration, engineering council approval, that I've actually gone, I'm now an IEng and gone through the process, been supported by Liz and others. And it's only now that I actually feel the institution with the rebrand and everything else is actually aligning to what I need it to be, which is the whole lot, not just the track. I think it's quite interesting to reflect on kind of my own experiences of dealing with the role of TME, track maintenance engineer. They always were, as Malcolm's alluded to, and I'm sure others agree, they always were fence, earthworks, drainage, track. When I started, that was kind of the drive that they did everything.
Yeah.
It's just the organisational challenge ended up going, we haven't got time to do fencing, we haven't got time to do off track, we haven't got time to do drainage, therefore we'll leave it.
I'll be doing it more.
And it's gone into the kind of Cinderella, we'll do that when it kind of strikes midnight, and we never do. So it's been a massive change for the positive, from my perspective.
You've been very resilient and persistent to stay with us then until we've actually got around to doing something useful for you.
Yeah, the people in the section have done it.
Oh, fair play. That's a good response.
What about, we're absolutely bombarded with information nowadays. And it's not just getting the journal once a quarter, you need all of the articles because they're interesting, and that's all you have to do. Now we've got stuff pouring out of the internet, out of the website, out of everywhere, every day, more and more. You know, how does one decide what to look at? Because you've also got to go shopping, and you've got to, go to do whatever else you're going to do. I wonder whether the journal, or I mean, the journal's the right vehicle, but somehow or other, I think the institution's got to provide people who are interested with some sort of guidance as to what the reading list ought to be, put it in a university type way. I mean, those of us that went to university in different forms, it would have taken us 100 years to read what they recommended, and you didn't read it all, but you somehow were guided to what the particular things were you ought to have a good look at. That might be a way of covering off this business of trying to get people to feel comfortable with being more rounded.
I think that's a good point. I think one of the things that the work they've been doing over the last couple of years on this CRM system that they're trying to develop is actually to help target that. So we should be able to filter certain things and say, here are my particular interests. And so some of the...
But if it's filtered, then you don't look at other people's interests.
Yeah, but...
Exactly, you don't think that.
But what I'm trying to say is, so if you've got, at the moment, you've got an avalanche of stuff that might be useful or might not be, you don't know, it's just a blizzard. Right? In the first instance, you'll have some control and saying, here are some of the things I would like to specifically see for sure, so that you should at least definitely get those. That's good. It's a sweet spot for you. But there will also be maybe the opportunity for some more general, broader reading, or let's call it connected things, where, okay, you've been interested in that. How about how you've been following?
Sounds like YouTube and what
you choose. I can't comment. I can't comment on that. But
yeah,
the idea is to try and use a little bit of almost the intelligence and technology and that helps guide you to, you'll definitely get the things you've said you want to be interested in, but there might be some other things you might find this interesting as well. It won't always be right, but I think that might help the blizzard cut it down a little bit, but also perhaps point you towards certain things that might be a useful addition.
Have we got that facility on the PWI website?
Right now, no, but that's what this CRM
Oh,
system
right.
is
Oh,
going to try and
What
give
does
us.
CRM stand for?
Customer relationship management.
Oh,
So you being a customer in this case, so it's actually about how people use it and how they can access that information, and you can customize some of that a little bit. So it's been very frustrating for Kate and the team about getting this up and running, because it's an IT project and it's been a bit tricky to get it fully up and running, but it should help that in the round for sure. I'm sure it won't be perfect, and I'm sure there will be a couple of teething problems, but I think it might move it forward a little bit.
It tells us in your own head. Use your instincts, read what you're interested in, and if it's more interesting.
It's not one of these things. I'm sure you can hit the block future things from this category.
I think one of the problems of that is sort of thing that the BBC are saying in general news.
Yeah.
You know, go online and select what interests you. And by selecting what interests you, you could be missing some really important information. So I think that's the wrong direction to go, because I think that the more broad an education we can have, the better it is for everybody.
I think this will only be one channel, or that might be useful for some people.
Yeah.
I think if we've got a more diverse community of practice within our institution, and there are different ways and different channels of working, whether it's like this, whether it's through some more online stuff, whether it's completely different. It's almost like that challenge of, well, actually somebody that I wasn't expecting to have a conversation about this one, that's really interesting. And I now want to go and find out a bit more about that. I think that's the sort of thing that will trigger some of those things. So I think it's a fair point. I would always want our people to be united. And at least consider some of the perspectives that are coming from other places.
Anyway, unless there's anything really blockbusting, I'm getting more anxious about Stephen's training than he is.
Just a short thing. Just a short thing.
Yeah.
In relation to the CRM, even not knowing what it is, may I make a recommendation? PWI adopts English as its official language.
I'm not sure I would support that. Maybe Scottish. No, I think we're all probably guilty of using acronyms and not properly explaining them. So I'll take that one on the chin.
TLAs.
That's the one. That's what acronyms. Yes.
I'll just make one point about the name. You asked in your article if people would make comments and so on. I did. It doesn't matter what I said. But the final thing was that I really believe our institution should have infrastructure in its title, because that's what we are. That includes structures, bridges, everything. That's what we are. Railway engineering doesn't cut it for me, but whatever people think about it, but we are an infrastructure organisation, and that's our strength.
And I would respect that view. I would probably historically have described myself as an infrastructure professional in the past. But the reason that we've settled at the moment in terms of the recommendation around for railway engineering is to try and draw out the breadth of what we do. Because yes, it is infrastructure, but it's also how infrastructure operates in the railway environment. And it's for railway engineering, so we're trying to signpost people that are not just engineers. Yes, we'll love to have more engineers, absolutely, but I don't want to exclude people that have got an interest in railway engineering that could also contribute, but like you folks have described already, a different perspective in those things. So I think we're trying to find a route forward that attracts people and that can make both a strong existing and perhaps a slightly different and diverse contribution as well, without losing that.
But we've always had in the past, any section that I've belonged to, we've always had civil engineers. We've always had particularly operating people who were always interested in coming to the meeting. And we have here as well. We've had some really good operating bases with us in this section, and it made for great debate, and we understood each other. And we had particularly, we had a carriage wagon man come to see us, has been talked to us on a number of occasions now. And he mentioned exactly what you did in your article. He says the railway is a system. That's where we should all be talking to each other.
I agree with that.
And he's one an ex-BR railwayman, you know.
Interestingly enough, I'm old enough to be XBR as well. So there we go.
Now, I think at this stage, it is now 7 o'clock. Richard didn't tell me he was going to do the vote of thanks, so yes,
You are the chair of this. There's some hierarchy.
So, Stephen, thank you very much for continuing the tradition of the president coming to speak to us in the spring. Obviously, we haven't had a particularly good spring so far, but we've been very lucky with the last about 6 presidents have always managed to speak to us at this time of the year. So we're very grateful for you taking the time and coming this evening, seeing us in person, updating us on matters PWI, because it's very important that we fully understand what is going on, because, you know, okay, some of us are able to tune into the secretary's meeting and hear what's going on, but others don't get that opportunity. So it's very important that we spread the word, and it's all part of the encouragement of the wider workforce and trying to encourage them
Communication
to get in. So it's very important. Thank you for standing at the top and spreading that information down. It is such an important aspect. There we go. Malcolm flying himself out.
Make your very clear instruction earlier.
So thank you very much for taking the time. Hopefully we won't detain you from your train. We've got a bit more business to take care of. But please feel free to depart while we do the last bit of the business.
Thank you very much.
And can we ask everyone to thank you?
Thank you very much.
Feel free to lift the phone or drop me a note if you want to follow up on any of the points we've discussed. It's been good to have a conversation today, and I don't think we push it hard enough in this world of Teams and electronic media and otherwise. Sometimes face to face is really refreshing, and I've really enjoyed the conversation this evening. So thank you.
Send me the notes, because we'll get a write up in our next newsline.
I'll do that. I'll do that. There's a very clear instruction.
Okay, we'll finish the meeting in a second, but we'll let Stephen head on to catch this train.
Okay, I'm more anxious than he is. 10 minutes, yeah. Thank you very much. Everybody, much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Platform 7. Platform 7.
Thank you very much.
I'll let you out. I'll restore it. Then you can get back again. Thanks.
So that takes us on and just to the next bit of the meeting. We've done the speaker. Goodbye. Thank you very much indeed. That was very good. Richard, next meeting, please.
Well, Matthew, on the ball. You've got some good photos, so we're looking forward to one. And a visit, hopefully, to Washwood Heath, who knows? So Matthew's the next speaker next month. The next day, we're going off to Wembley, hopefully, on Thursday. So 2 depots in 2 days. I forgot to mention whether you are happy with the last news lines, but there we are. Nobody said they're not, so it's too bad. Also on the 10th of April, same day as our next section meeting, Andy Savage of the Railway Heritage Trust and a chap called Tim Headley-Jones, who I think is sort of taking over a bit, are coming to the Railway Museum at Didcot to unveil this plaque to do with restoring the Cuddlestone water tank there. But of particular interest to the section here is that Philip Rees, one of the things he did was compile a chart of all the railway engineers, the civil engineers of the Great Western Railway, up till a bit after when he was chief, but right from a chap whose name begins with B, I think. And that chart's going to be handed over for permanent sort of curation at the Railway Museum at Didcot. So if you really want to see it, you can either come down some other time or turn up on that day and see it being formally handed over by the Railway Heritage Trust. That's the last point I've got to make, really.
Okay, I'd just like to say thank you to, oh, Matthew.
I've got a couple of points to make.
Okay.
Just a request. My talk is going to be, got it, HS2, I think, it's going to be, I'll call it what's repeated history to HS2.
History to HS2, okay.
That's not just for HS2. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, I did ask in my email with this new name we have, going to have a new template.
No, it's not official yet. I mean, it's still under debate, so things continue as is at the current time. I mean, you see stuff coming out from the HQ, but
That's the new.
until it's all finalised, because they've still got to go through all the legal due process, so that hasn't happened yet. So we carry on as is. So is that it?
Yes.
Good. I did have something to say, but I can't remember what it was now.
Really important.
Yeah, it was very important, actually. I would like to say well done to all the committee members, because we've got a full hand. Tony's just left, but including Ray online, we've got all of the committee here tonight. So thank you to the committee for making the effort and all supporting the president on his meeting tonight. So that was the important thing that I was trying to remember what I was going to say.
He's been very quiet.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you have to be.
Don't encourage him. And we're still looking for somebody to take over the role of vice chairman now that Phil has moved away, and nobody has made this nice couple of advertising. So we need to push for a vice chairman to fill in the blank spot on the news lines, because I do not like leaving it empty. So if anyone's got any ideas or need to push somebody, elbow them into taking it on.
I gave you an idea.
Well, nothing has come back to me, despite the idea.
I mentioned to
I know you did.
last
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay, yeah,
Yes,
maybe I'll,
yes, you've got to work on it.
hear, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, that concludes the proceedings for this evening. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for coming and supporting the president in his talk this evening. And thank you for the two stalwarts who remained online to the end. And we shall hopefully see you all next month. And we look forward to hearing what you've got to say in Washwood Heath 2 HS2. Probably more Vicky Street. Thanks very much. Okay, see you next time.
Jeremy, how many online?
There was 5. Probably about 2 now.
Given it to.
Yeah, just mention that.
That's going on.
There's two things.
We'll introduce that to next time.
No, it's Thursday, so I want to.
Is this right?